This program is brought to you by IRINN TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from IRINN TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
According to a survey conducted by the BBC and the American BBC networks, 2/3 of the surveyed Iraqis do not believe that the situation will improve within the next year.
Many of them believe that the living conditions are difficult, and 88% say that they have limited access to power. The survey also revealed that fewer Iraqis now support democracy and more support the establishment of an Islamic state with a strong ruler.
More than 4 years ago, the coalition forces led by the United States invaded Iraq despite the refusal of the United Nations Security Council. The decision to launch the war was preceded by an American accusation against Iraq of possessing weapons of mass destruction and having links with Al-Qaeda, thus making it a threat to international security. The two sides have paid a price for this war. The Iraqis paid the price with many wasted lives and resources, in addition to the destruction of their country's infrastructure. The Americans paid a price with their blood and money. Washington justifications for the war were proven wrong. No weapons of mass destruction were found in Iraq, and the United States could not provide any evidence linking the former regime to Al-Qaeda. About 1 million Iraqis were killed, and millions others were displaced to other areas in Iraq or other countries, not to mention the billions of dollars that could not be accounted for. According to the Pentagon, more than 3,100 American soldiers were killed, and thousands others were injured, and billions of dollars of American tax money were wasted. The war in Iraq, which the American president himself compared to the war in Vietnam, has led the Republicans to lose control of the Congress to the Democrats for the first time in 12 years. These losses, in addition to inaccurate reasons given for launching the war, have contributed to the change in international opinion which supported America before the war. The Iraqis, who have been promised with democracy, security and prosperity for past 4 years, are now faced with a bitter reality and see a pessimistic future. The survey that was conducted by the BBC and the American ABC showed that 2/3 of the surveyed Iraqis said that the situation will not be better next year. 50% of them said that they are not satisfied with the current Iraqi government, and 82% said that they have lost their confidence in the foreign forces.
On the 4th anniversary of the war on Iraq, more than 30,000 people participated in an anti-war demonstration in New York.
Demonstrators demanded that the administration end the American occupation of Iraq and that Congress stop funding the war there.
No justice, no peace. America out of the Middle East. These were some of the phrases that were chanted by more than 30,000 protesters. On the 4th anniversary for the war on Iraq, they went to the streets in New York, despite the snow, to express their increasing anger over the continuation of the American occupation. The demonstration was organized by many anti-war organizations that were formed during the past 4 years and joined forces with the largest anti-war movement, the Coalition for Peace and Justice. Some of these organizations are Soldiers Against War, Artists Against War, Veterans Against War, and even Children Against War.
In addition to demanding that our sons and daughters be returned home, we also demand that the administration pay compensations to the Iraqis for what happened to them as a result of this war.
In order to appeal to a larger segment of the American population, protesters brought attention to the fact that billions of dollars that were spent by the Bush administration on the war in Iraq could have been spent on education and healthcare.
We want the president of this country to know that it is immoral to spend billions on the war and cut education and Medicare.
While public surveys showed that Bush's popularity has decreased to unprecedented levels, protesters chanted slogans demanding his resignation because he lied to them and involved their country in unjustified and immoral war. They also demanded the Congress to stop funding the war if Bush refuses to answer their calls. The American President, George Bush, did not respond to the anti-war demonstrations before the war, but he can no longer ignore these voices after 4 years of heavy losses and the fact that the Democrats have taken over the Congress.
New York.
Thousands of demonstrators have been holding anti-war rallies in various parts of the world against the Iraq war. The protest marked the anniversary of when U.S.-led troops invaded Iraq 4 years ago. Yesterday, American Democrats accused the president of committing forces to an open-ended civil war. They come as George W. Bush said his new strategy for success in the country was showing what he called hopeful signs of progress. More in this Reuters report.
Their campaign has been as drawn out as the war itself. But on a day where up to 8 people died in chlorine gas attacks in Iraq, their concerns about whether peace can really be achieved in a country split by sectarian violence is overwhelming. In Washington, thousands of anti-war demonstrators braved the cold temperatures to march towards the Pentagon to stage a similar protest to one held 40 years ago over the Vietnam War. Pressure for President Bush to announce a date for withdrawal has escalated since he announced plans in January to deploy another 20,000 soldiers to Iraq. Other cities also staged protests. In Sydney, campaigners joined a day of worldwide condemnation.
It's a completely racist war. Iraqis have a right to self-determination.
Demonstrators also called for the release of Australian detainee David Hicks, who's been held without trial in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba for 5 years. The US Embassy became the focal point of protests in Greece as hundreds of students, peace supporters and leftist groups chanted anti-American slogans.
We believe that it is time to end occupation, and we will end this occupation, because countries who are supporting this war, like the Greek government, they are facing student occupations, worker struggles.
In the Turkish capital, Istanbul, a heavy police presence ensured a mostly peaceful protest, although there were a few minor scuffles. Demonstrations in Spain were the biggest in Europe, with around 100,000 people converging in the capital, Madrid. Protesters denounced the US president and their former leader for alleged war crimes. On March the 20th, it'll be 4 years since the invasion of Iraq. Yet, as violence continues day by day, it's as uncertain now as it was then as to when the war will come to an end.
On a day like this in 2003, the drums of war were violently beating in the U.S. Capitol. It has been 4 years since a war was declared on Iraq. To mark this anniversary, people from around the globe came out in large numbers to loudly say no to the war. Massive protests broke out in many cities around the world calling for an end to the war and the U.S.-led occupation in Iraq. From Spain to Malaysia and passing through the streets of Washington, D.C., hundreds of thousands of angry protesters took to the streets to express their frustration and disapproval of the war. Faiza Al-Alaq reports.
One wonders how the U.S. President George W. Bush would view these anti-war images in the streets. Amidst these angry protests, Bush and his followers found themselves in an awkward position. The war has entered its fourth year, and the Bush administration is still trying to justify its presence in Iraq. On its fourth-year anniversary, the war on Iraq does not seem to be winding down. It is quite the contrary. The security situation continues to deteriorate, and Iraq is not any better than it was 4 years ago. Meanwhile, the people of the world continue to say no to the war. Among the protesters was Hollywood actor and movie star Martin Sheen, who once played the role of a U.S. president.
This government, no.
This government does not represent the American people. It has distorted our image in the world. It is a big insult to be viewed by others in this way. Because of the war, we do not have a credible leadership.
The cries of American protesters in Washington, New York, and other U.S. cities were echoed in the streets of Madrid, where many have criticized their former government for its support to Bush. The fourth anniversary of the war in Iraq coincided with the anniversary of the Madrid bombings, which many believe was a hefty price that Spain had to pay because it joined the U.S.-led campaign in Iraq. It would be very hard for Bush to turn away from all these ugly effigies portraying him in the streets, or ignore the loud cries of angry protesters in Washington, Turkey, Malaysia, and elsewhere. 4 years ago, Bush promised that the world would be a better place to live. However, the outcome is quite disturbing, and the world has turned into a haunted place.
What did Baghdad look like in the days preceding the United States-led invasion? Baghdad, which came under massive airstrikes and heavy shelling, has fallen into the hands of the United States forces at the Firdaus Square. Our correspondent, Majid Hamid, reports from Baghdad.
In the middle of March 2003, Baghdad was gearing up for war. Then, the Iraqi army carried out several military parades throughout the streets of Baghdad. Everyone in Baghdad started the countdown for the showdown with the West. A showdown that began as soon as the 90-minute deadline given to Saddam and his two sons to leave Iraq expired. On Thursday morning, after the deadline given by George W. Bush passed, Baghdad came under massive airstrikes and heavy shelling by the U.S.-led forces. The United States forces tried to cut off supplies to the Iraqi capital, and they targeted Saddam Hussein. Later, the U.S. tanks headed to Baghdad through the Iraqi desert, avoiding major cities in an attempt to avoid street battles. In the southern city of Basra, the British forces, which had faced strong resistance, surrounded the Qasr port for days before they were able to seize it and enter the city.
Fierce battles and clashes erupted in southern Iraq. After the coalition forces seized control of major cities in southern Iraq, everyone thought that the war was over. Iraqi officials' statements during the war were not credible.
The march of the U.S. forces to the Iraqi capital was delayed for days due to sandstorms and pockets of resistance by the former Iraqi army. 3 weeks after the war erupted, the U.S. forces, backed by armored military vehicles, launched an attack on Baghdad International Airport, or what used to be known as Saddam Airport.
I can say, and you can document what I'm about to say. They started to commit suicide at the historical walls of Baghdad.
وفي 7 أبريل وعندما كان وزير الإعلام العراقي محمد سعيد الصحاف يكذب أنباء.
On April 7, 2003, and while Mohammed Saeed Shahaf, Iraq's Minister of Information, dismissed reports that the U.S. forces had entered Baghdad, the coalition forces had already reached and surrounded the gates of the Republican Palace in the heart of the Iraq capital. During this particular hour, and as the U.S. forces had reached the Iraqi capital and the statue of Saddam was toppled, Iraqis did not know whether a new era of freedom or occupation had just begun in their country. From Firdaus Square, Baghdad, Majid Hamid, Al-Arabiya.
وسط العاصمة العراقية بغداد ماجد حميد العربية.
Iraqi
Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki insisted sectarian killing had come to an end in his country, blaming ongoing daily violence on Al-Qaeda. Maliki said in comments to be broadcast Monday on the eve of the 4th anniversary of the United States-led and British-backed invasion of Iraq, quote, "It threatened the breakout of a sectarian war, but this has been ended by two factors. The first one is the national reconciliation on which we still insist." He told ITV television, "The second thing is the ability of the security services in arresting those who are provoking the sectarian unrest." Despite Maliki's comments, Iraqis continue to perish at the hands of sectarian violence.
On the heels of the 4th anniversary of the Iraq invasion, it was violence as usual. A bomb blast near a Shiite mosque in central Baghdad killed at least 5 people today and wounded 15 others. The explosion occurred near the Hussein Abu Ruh mosque. Separately, gunmen killed 3 civilians in broad daylight today in the mainly Shiite provincial capital of Hilla, south of Baghdad. Police in Hilla also found large caches of weapons, including 500 mortar rounds and artillery shells. To the north, the body of an unidentified man was also found in the town of Mahawil. In another attack in Babil province, a woman and her 4-year-old daughter were wounded when insurgents fired 2 mortar rounds on a residential area of the town of Iskandariya. With Iraq bogged down in sectarian violence that threatens to tip the country into civil war, Bush announced a strategy shift earlier this year and has started sending some 26,000 reinforcements for a security crackdown focused on Baghdad. Defense Secretary Robert Gates said yesterday it was too early to evaluate whether the last U.S. strategy was working, but so far so good. According to Gates, U.S. generals say it will probably be summer before the impact of the extra troops can be fully assessed, and have warned the troops' increase could have a squirting effect while Al-Qaeda insurgents would operate elsewhere. With American public opinion turned increasingly against the Iraq war, a poll published by the BBC today showed only 18% of Iraqis have confidence in the US-led forces. The Iraqi government inspired more confidence than US-led forces, with opinion almost evenly split on whether people had confidence in the US-backed administration headed by Shiite Islamist Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. About 86% were concerned about someone in their household being a victim of violence. Iraqis were also disappointed by reconstruction efforts since the invasion, with 67% saying efforts had not been effective.
And in the U.S., anti-war demonstrators readied for at least 1,000 candlelight vigils today, demanding an end to the war in Iraq 4 years after it began. Organizers from the group United for Peace and Justice said between 25,000 and 30,000 people marched in the rally, which came a day after similar mass protests in Washington and Los Angeles. Police did not estimate the turnout, a colorful mixture of students, cyclists, Vietnam War veterans and musicians marched through Midtown Manhattan, drumming and chanting slogans such as "Troops out now" and calling for President George W. Bush to be impeached. The crowds braved near-freezing temperatures as they marched under clear skies down streets lined with piles of snow.
A new UN resolution against Iran's nuclear program will face a proportionate response, so said Abbas Araghchi, Deputy Iranian Foreign Minister in Legal and International Affairs, in a meeting with foreign ambassadors on Monday. He added Iran is fully ready for both paths of cooperation and confrontation. He continued, as there is a precedent for paying a price to preserve its independence and rights, Tehran is now ready to pay these prices. This comes as the UN Security Council is set to meet this week. Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Fratkov says his country believes Iran's nuclear case should be settled only through the ongoing regular inspections of the International Atomic Energy Agency of the country's facilities. Fratkov made the remarks at the close of the meeting with South African Vice President Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka in Pretoria on Monday, and added Moscow and Pretoria share common viewpoints on Iran's access to nuclear nuclear technology, and that the remaining issues should be tackled within the framework of the UN nuclear watchdog. 3 coordinated car bombs and a mortar attack within 30 minutes killed 15 people and wounded at least 35 in Iraq's northern city of Kirkuk on Monday. The first and the biggest attack, a car bomb near 2 mosques, killed 10 and wounded 8. The second car bomb went off in a South Kirkuk market, killing 5 and wounding 26. The mortar attack near the city's civil defense office left 1 civilian wounded. Also today, gunmen killed 3 civilians in broad daylight in Hilla, south of Baghdad, wounding another 4. In another attack in Babil province, a woman and her 4-year-old daughter were wounded when insurgents fired 2 mortar rounds on a residential area of the town of Iskandaria. Anti-war protests are continuing worldwide in the run-up to the 4th anniversary of the US-led invasion of Iraq. On the eve of the anniversary, thousands of protesters marched through New York streets to call for the immediate withdrawal of American troops from Iraq. Members of peace organizations and individuals staged a huge rally through the city, calling for an end to war in Iraq.
Troops out! When do we want it? Now! Today we are calling for our troops to come home. We want the president of this country to know that there's something morally missing.
Our voice does matter, and this is one of many ways to let the president and the country know that we want this war to end.
I can't believe it's been 4 years already. It's going to go on for how many more years? I don't know. I was here last year. Here again, and we're in a worse situation than we were last year. Talking about a surge, an escalation of troops. What can I say? It's a disgrace.
Other cities across the United States were the scene of similar rallies. Anti-war demonstrations were also held in Miami, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Oklahoma City and Oregon. Meanwhile, in Brussels, the Bush administration was denounced by dozens of different groups. Demonstrators marched to the American embassy in Belgium, observing 2 minutes of silence and evoking the death toll by lying on the ground. March 20th marks the 4th anniversary of U.S. invasion of Iraq.
An American newspaper has pointed to the effect of the war in Iraq on the United States. The prolonged fighting in Iraq has resulted in a remarkable financial and human loss and has shaken the military foundation in the U.S.
The war against Iraq has greatly weakened the roots and the foundation of the U.S. Army. As it stands, the Pentagon, the U.S. Department of Defense, is facing serious problems in retaining senior military officials.
According
to USA Today, America faces serious military problems, as American Army experts believe that the U.S. Army is short 3,000 senior military officers each year. Based on recent statistics, 13,900 majors and 8,750 colonels are now serving in the Army, a number that is below the minimum to satisfy the U.S. Army's expanding needs. According to this report, in addition to the loss of senior officers, the Army suffers from a shortage in new recruits and officers cadets. Meanwhile, the Pentagon reported that the number of volunteer soldiers has been on the decrease. These are the soldiers who joined the Army for financial interests and a career. Many of them were deployed to the war zone for more than 3 times in Iraq due to the shortage of new recruits. Petraeus, the U.S. senior commander in Iraq, expressed this concern. This army can barely endure the turmoil against the Iraqi insurgents.
مرکز پزشکی ارتش آمریکا نیز اعلام کرده
3,190 American soldiers have lost their lives during the war on Iraq and thousands have been injured. Also, America's Army VA medical centers have been reporting that most of the returning soldiers have been suffering from mental and emotional distress-related diseases. The Iraq war has now become a long and costly war to the United States. It has reshaped the political and military scenes in both the US and Iraq. Most political analysts believe that now the US is looking for a way out of the crisis in Iraq by shifting the problem to international bodies like it had done in Afghanistan, a repeat of its lethargic stance.
New York.
4 years of war and no end in sight. Stay tuned for Link TV's Mosaic Intelligence Report.
Four years ago, then Secretary of State Colin Powell testified before the UN Security Council. He made the case of the absolute necessity of going to war against Saddam Hussein. What follows is history. In this short report, The Picture Speaks, we bring you a review in images of the last 4 years of the war on Iraq.
The war on terror is not over, yet it is not endless. We do not know the day of final victory, but we have seen the turning of the tide.
Military intelligence officers told the Red Cross the abuse was part of the process. Physical and psychological coercion were used by military intelligence in a systematic way to gain confessions and extract information. The report added, although the Red Cross made repeated warnings to the US-led coalition about the abuse throughout 2003, this appeared to have had little effect on the occupation forces.
Washington claimed that the number of U.S. soldiers killed in the war is 2,000.
I've committed more than 20,000 additional American troops to Iraq.
I'm Jamal Dajani for the Mosaic Intelligence Report. To learn more about this program or to share your thoughts, visit us at linktv.org/mosaic.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/mosaic For more information about these broadcasters, or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report, Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.